All right, so we've got a pretty hefty stack of JavaScript stuff here
Yeah,
that you've sent our way.
it is a lot,
It looks like you are.
but it's good stuff.
Yeah, it's great stuff, and it seems like you're really trying to get ready to really dive deep into web development. So
Yeah.
we're going to try to break down some of the essentials for you and
Absolutely.
hopefully give you a few aha moments.
I think we can do that for sure.
I think so too, and
Yeah.
prevent some of the head scratching that I definitely did
Yes, sir.
when I was first learning this stuff. So
Yeah, no, JavaScript is such a cool language, and
Yeah.
it's really everywhere these days. And it seems like, from what you've given us, you really want to see how it all kind of fits together.
Yeah.
You've got like basic definitions, you've got
Yeah.
like deeper dives into how it compares to other languages.
yeah, like what even is JavaScript?
Yeah, that's a great place to start.
Like how do we even define this thing?
Yeah, so at like the most basic level,
Yeah.
JavaScript is a programming language that brings websites to life. Okay.
Like it's what takes those static HTML and CSS elements and makes them interactive.
Oh.
So think of like interactive maps you see online when
Yeah.
you're looking at a website and content loads without having to refresh the page.
Right.
That's JavaScript.
Oh, so that's how that happens.
Yeah.
That's always kind of like,
A lot of people don't realize that.
yeah,
I never
that's
really
all JavaScript behind the scenes.
Yeah, I never really thought about it, but it's like HTML and CSS give you like the bare bones, like the walls and the roof.
That's true.
But JavaScript is what like makes it all
Yeah,
come to life and like,
it brings the fun in.
yeah, brings the fun in.
Yeah, and it's also super important for front-end web development.
Right.
It's one of the most sought-after skills
Yeah.
because it really can elevate the user experience so much.
Okay, so we've established that it's important and it's in demand
Yeah,
and it makes websites better and more dynamic.
for sure.
I'm with you so far.
Very good.
But like, what about some of these other concepts that keep popping up?
Okay.
Like I'm seeing a lot about promises.
Yeah.
Like what are promises?
So promises, they can seem kind of abstract at first,
Yeah.
but they're really important for managing those actions that take time to complete.
Okay.
So like imagine ordering food online.
Okay.
You place your order, you get a confirmation,
Oh,
it's
that's
your
it.
promise.
Okay.
While the restaurant is preparing your food, that promise is pending.
Right.
When your food is ready, the promise is fulfilled, and the delivery person shows up with your food.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say the restaurant runs out of an ingredient.
Oh.
That promise is rejected, and you get a notification that your order can't be completed.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of how promises work.
So it's like JavaScript's way of dealing with all those behind-the-scenes things that are happening without making the whole website freeze up.
Yeah, exactly. We make sure that the website can stay responsive and everything runs smoothly.
Right.
Even when you have more complex stuff happening in the background.
That makes a lot more sense.
Awesome.
So promises. Okay, got it.
Check.
What about closures?
Ah, closures.
These seem like a big deal too.
Yeah, those are really powerful.
Okay.
So they basically allow a function inside of another function
Mm-hmm.
to remember and access variables from that outer function,
Okay.
even after the outer function has finished running.
All right.
It's kind of like if you pack a note in your lunch bag.
Okay.
You close the bag, you finish making your lunch.
Yeah.
But the note is still accessible inside the bag.
Okay.
So that's kind of the idea.
All right. So like, how does that actually work in code?
So in code, that lets you do some pretty cool stuff.
Okay.
Like you can create these private variables that are
Okay.
kind of protected from being accidentally changed.
Right.
And it also helps with things like handling events
Right.
and making functions that you can reuse in different parts of your code.
Gotcha. So it's all about like organization and
Yeah, efficiency and modularity, all those good
Yeah.
things.
so these are like, they're abstract, but they seem really important.
Oh, yeah, they're super important. They're kind of like the backbone of what makes JavaScript so dynamic
Okay.
and powerful.
All right. So we've got promises, we've got closures.
Yes.
What about arrays?
Arrays. Oh, those are a bit more straightforward.
Okay.
Basically, they're like containers that can hold multiple values.
Okay.
Think of it like a shopping list.
Okay.
You got different items on your list.
Yeah.
Each item has its own place.
Right.
You can add things, remove things, update things.
Mm-hmm.
And in JavaScript, an array can hold different types of data.
Okay.
You can have numbers, text,
Yeah.
even other arrays inside of an array.
Right. So it's like keeping things organized.
Exactly. It's all about managing and organizing your data effectively.
Cool. All right. So we've got arrays I'm seeing a lot about.
Yeah.
Functions and objects as well. Are those related to arrays?
They're different, but they work together. So
Okay.
functions are like sets of instructions
Right.
that perform specific tasks.
Right.
You can think of them like recipes.
Yeah.
You have ingredients, which are your data.
Yeah.
You follow the steps, which is your code.
Right.
And then you get a delicious result.
Okay. I like that analogy. That
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, I like food analogies,
Yeah.
so it works for me.
Yeah, that works.
What about objects?
What about objects? Yeah.
So those are a bit more complex.
Okay.
Imagine you're describing your bike.
Okay.
You talk about its properties, like its color, its brand, how many gears it has.
Mhm.
And then it also has methods,
Okay.
which are the actions it can perform,
Okay.
like braking, pedaling, changing gears.
Right.
So in JavaScript, objects represent those real-world things with their data and their behaviors.
Okay.
So you have properties, which is the data, and you have methods, which are the actions.
Gotcha. So objects are for like modeling things that
Yeah,
are...
exactly.
Exactly.
Like representing things that you see and interact with
Okay.
in a way that JavaScript can understand.
So it's like we've got these basic building blocks now.
Yeah, we've got a good foundation.
So how does JavaScript like
Yeah.
actually interact with web pages?
Ooh, that's a great question. And that's where we really start to see JavaScript's power in action.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm ready to keep going.
Let's do it.
I'm feeling a little bit more confident now that we've got these like basic things down.
I'm glad to hear it.
I'm ready. I'm ready for more.
Let's dive in. So where do you want to go next?
I mean, it sounds like JavaScript has to actually run somewhere.
Okay.
Can't just like float around in cyberspace.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So that's where we get into this concept of like client-side
Okay.
versus server-side JavaScript.
Yeah.
So client-side JavaScript, that's the code that runs directly in a user's web browser.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the stuff that makes the website interactive.
Okay.
It handles user actions. You know, when you click a button,
Right.
something happens on the page. That's all client-side JavaScript.
Okay. So like when I click a button and something changes, but the page doesn't have to like reload.
Exactly.
That's client side.
That's client-side JavaScript.
Okay, cool.
It's all happening right there in your browser.
Great.
Now, server-side JavaScript, that's a bit different.
Okay.
That runs on a web server, which is basically a powerful computer
Mm-hmm.
that hosts websites and manages all the data.
Okay.
So this is where you handle more of those complex tasks,
Right.
like interacting with databases,
Oh, wow.
processing user input, doing all the heavy lifting.
It's like behind the scenes stuff
Exactly. Yeah, it's all happening behind the scenes.
that powers the website from like a central location.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
got it. And a really important part of client-side JavaScript
Okay.
is something called the Document Object Model, or DOM for short.
The DOM. Okay.
Yeah, so think of it like a map of your web page.
Okay.
Every element on the page, headings, paragraphs, images, buttons,
Mhm.
all those things are represented as like a node in this map. And JavaScript can use that DOM to access those nodes
Okay.
and manipulate them, so it can change the content.
Right.
It can change the style.
Yeah.
It can change the behavior of those elements.
Wow. So that's what gives developers so much control.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like having a set of tools
Yeah.
to rearrange a room
Yeah.
without actually having to move any furniture.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
It's all happening in the code.
Okay. Cool. So
Yeah.
the DOM. All right.
Yeah. And, when we talk about control
Mhm.
and user experience, you might be surprised to learn just how many different applications there are for JavaScript.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not just for websites anymore.
Okay.
We use it in web development, of course,
Mhm.
but also game development,
Oh, wow.
mobile app development,
Really?
server-side scripting, you name it.
So it's like everywhere.
It really is becoming ubiquitous.
That's wild. I had no idea. So like what makes it so popular then? Well, I mean, there are a bunch of reasons.
Okay.
First of all, it's fast and efficient.
It's relatively easy to learn compared to some other programming languages, and it plays well with other languages and technologies.
So it's like the friendly language.
It's like the social butterfly of the programming world.
Right.
It gets along with everyone.
Okay, cool. So it's fast, it's efficient,
Yeah.
it's easy to learn,
Mm-hmm.
plays well with others.
Exactly.
I'm seeing a theme here,
Yeah, and one of the big advantages that keeps coming up is performance.
right?
Nobody wants to use a slow website
Yeah, true.
or a sluggish app.
Yeah.
So JavaScript being so performant
Right.
really helps create those smooth and enjoyable experiences.
Okay, so like why is it so fast?
So JavaScript is what we call an interpreted language,
Okay.
which means that it doesn't have to be compiled before it can run.
Okay.
So basically, the browser can just read the code and execute it
All right.
without having to go through this extra step of compilation.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that makes it really fast.
All right, cool. Well, that explains why everything's so snappy these days.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm also seeing all this stuff about JavaScript frameworks and libraries.
Oh, yeah, frameworks and libraries. Those are like pre-built toolkits for developers.
Okay.
So they provide a bunch of pre-written code components, functionalities that you can use to build websites and applications.
So instead of having to code everything from scratch.
Yeah, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Yeah.
You can use these frameworks and libraries to handle those common tasks and build more complex features more efficiently.
So are there like certain frameworks or libraries that are like super popular or?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So you've got React.js, AngularJS, Vue.js.
Nice.
Those are just a few examples.
All right.
And they each have their own strengths and approaches.
Yeah.
So which one you choose really depends on the specific project,
Right.
your team's expertise.
Okay.
Even personal preference sometimes comes into play.
Wow. Okay, so this is a whole world unto itself.
It really is.
So JavaScript, like, it's been around for a while.
It has?
Has it changed much, like, over time?
Oh, it's definitely evolved a lot over the years.
Okay.
One of the big milestones was the release of ES6,
Okay.
which stands for ECMAScript 6 back in 2015.
Right?
So that was kind of like a major software update.
Right.
It introduced a bunch of new features.
Mm-hmm.
It streamlined the syntax.
Yeah.
It made the language even more powerful and enjoyable to work with.
So even though it's old, it's still like,
Yeah, it's a living language.
Oh,
It's constantly being updated and improved
okay, that makes sense.
to keep up with, the demands of modern web development.
Right. So it's always staying relevant.
Exactly.
Cool. So it's old, but it's not outdated.
Not at all.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, and, speaking of staying relevant, there were some comparisons in the materials you sent
Yeah.
to other languages like Java and JavaScript.
Yeah. What is the difference?
So those can be confusing.
Yeah, because the names are so similar.
Yeah, the names are super similar, and they actually share some similarities in terms of the syntax, the way the code looks. But they're really fundamentally different languages with different purposes. So Java, that's a general-purpose, object-oriented programming language.
Okay.
It's often used for building large-scale applications, things like enterprise software.
And JavaScript's like for the web, right?
Yeah, JavaScript is primarily focused on making websites interactive and engaging for users.
Gotcha.
Now, JavaScript, that's basically a dialect of JavaScript
Okay.
that was developed by Microsoft, and it was mostly used in Internet Explorer.
Okay.
But JavaScript itself is far more widely used and supported.
All right. So, like, is it safe to say that JavaScript is kind of the king of the hill when it comes to?
I think it's safe to say that, yeah, its versatility, its performance, and the fact that it has this massive community support have really made it the go-to language for web development.
Right. So we've talked about, like, the good stuff.
Yeah.
Now, what about the quirks?
Okay, yeah. So JavaScript definitely has its quirks and nuances.
Okay.
But, those are actually part of what makes it so interesting.
All right. I'm ready.
And understanding those nuances can actually make you a better developer.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, quirks and nuances. Let's get into it.
All right, so JavaScript's got its quirks for sure.
Yeah.
But that's kind of part of its charm, right? And honestly, understanding those little quirks can make you a much better developer in the long run.
Okay, how so?
Well, because you start to anticipate potential problems, and you can write code that's more robust and less likely to break.
Okay, so it's like learning the rules of the road so you can avoid accidents.
It's all about being aware of those potholes and sharp turns.
All right, well, let's start with one that I keep seeing pop up. Case sensitivity.
Ah, yes, case sensitivity.
Like, what is the deal with that?
So JavaScript is very particular about capitalization.
Yeah.
Like, my variable with a capital V is completely different from my variable, all lowercase. And that can lead to some really frustrating errors if you're not careful.
So it's like JavaScript is super picky about grammar.
Yeah, you could say that.
One wrong capitalization and the whole sentence falls apart.
Yeah, it's like forgetting to dot your I's and cross your T's.
Gotcha. So pay attention to the detail.
Absolutely. Precision is key in JavaScript.
Case sensitivity check. All right, what about this isNaN function?
Ah, isn't the mysterious function?
It sounds like a secret code or something.
Not quite a secret code, but definitely a useful one.
Okay.
So isNaN stands for is not a number.
Okay.
And it's basically a way to check if a value is actually a number.
Okay, why is that important?
Well, sometimes you're dealing with user input.
Right.
And you never know what kind of data you're going to get.
Yeah, people can type in anything.
Exactly. So if you try to do calculations with something that's not a number, things can get messy.
Right, like trying to add apples and oranges.
Yeah, or like trying to multiply a word by a number.
Okay, that makes sense. So isNaN helps prevent those kind of like data mishaps.
Exactly. It's like a safety net for your code.
All right, cool. isNaN, Dan. Got it. Now, what about comments?
Oh, comments. Those are your best friend in coding.
Really? Why?
Because they make your code so much more readable and maintainable.
Good.
So comments are basically lines of text that are ignored by JavaScript.
Right.
They're not actual code. They're just notes for humans.
Okay.
So you can use them to explain what your code is doing, to clarify any tricky logic.
Yeah.
Or even to temporarily disable a section of code if you're testing something out.
So it's like leaving yourself little reminders and explanations.
Exact. Think of them as breadcrumbs for your future self.
Okay, that makes sense, because sometimes you come back to your code later and you're like, wait, what was I doing here?
All the time. It happens to the best of us.
All right, comments, check. Now, there's one more concept that I've been struggling with a little bit. Hoisting.
Hoisting. Oh, yeah. That's a classic JavaScript quirk.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit mysterious.
It can be, but it's not as complicated as it sounds.
Okay.
Basically, hoisting means that variable and function declarations are kind of moved to the top of their scope.
Their scope.
Yeah, so like the block of code where they're defined
Okay.
before the code is actually executed.
So even if I declare a variable like halfway down the code, JavaScript acts as if it was declared at the beginning.
Yeah, that's the idea, but there's a catch.
Okay.
Only the declaration is hoisted, not the assignment.
Okay. What does that mean?
So like if you declare a variable but you don't give it a value yet, and then you try to use it before the assignment, you're going to run into problems.
Oh, so it's like JavaScript is saying, hey, I know this variable exists, but I don't know what it is yet.
Exactly. So it's best practice to declare and assign your variables at the top of their scope, just to avoid any confusion.
All right, so hoisting, it's a little tricky, but I think I'm starting to get it.
It definitely takes some getting used to.
Yeah.
But once you understand it, it's not so scary.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, from the basics to some of these quirks and nuances.
And everything in between.
I feel like I have a much better grasp of JavaScript now.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, this has been super helpful.
You know, JavaScript is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
There's always something new to learn. But I think you've got a really solid foundation now.
I think so too.
So keep practicing, keep exploring, and you'll be amazed at what you can build.
That's great advice. Thanks for taking the time to break all this down for me.
It's been my pleasure. I love talking about JavaScript.
Well, I have to say, I'm feeling a lot more confident about diving into the world of web development now.
That's what I like to hear.
And for everyone listening out there, keep those coding fingers nimble, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.